It started with one man's vision.
This is in the summer of 1975, and I actually concluded that I should start the company in 1982. And sure enough, that's exactly what I did.
EA laid the kind of DNA foundation pretty different than the other companies.
Trip was and is a visionary.
They played by their own rules.
Where we're going to answer the question that we asked in our original recruiting ad, which is, can a computer make you cry?
And reinvented the entire game industry.
That was really the birth of EA Sports. It was the first time in the industry that celebrities had been used in a game.
They've had this kind of core success in these core franchises that have allowed them to become experimental.
There were tough times.
EA's ultimate success and even existence was in doubt.
But their perseverance paid off big. This is the story of Electronic Arts.
The EA machine works. It is unstoppable. It's like a giant battleship that's turning its guns, and when it starts firing, you do not want to be on the beach.
In the late 1970s, two students have a chance meeting.
I was at Stanford Business School. We had a professor, a decision analysis guy, brilliant guy. And in class one time he looked around and said, "You Stanford kids, you all worry about money. So I'm gonna ask you a different question. If it weren't for money, what would you like to do?" And he came to me and I said, "I'd like to help create this kind of adult Disneyland where you're in a story, kind of an athletic participant in a story, but the computer creates the environment, the people around you." And there's just silence in the class, like, "Whew, boy, is he ever out of it?" And this guy came up to me afterwards and said, "I've never heard that before, but there's one other kid in our class, and one of the other classes said something similar to that, you gotta go talk to him." And that was Trip Hawkins.
While Trip was at Stanford, he had dreams of starting his own software company.
And I started thinking, wow, if you can actually go to a store and get a terminal and take it home, then that's exactly what I've been waiting for. I want to be able to make games for home computers. I went back to my desk and I spent the afternoon figuring out how long it would take for there to be enough of these computers in homes that I could start my game company. And this is in the summer of 1975, and I actually concluded that I should start the company in 1982. And sure enough, that's exactly what I did.
When we got out of Stanford, he said, 5 years, I'm going to start a software company. Get ready. So I did various this and that. 5 years later, he called up and said, "Okay, I'm getting 6 other people together who want to talk about starting a company. Do you want to come?" I said yes. 3 months later, he started the company, and I came in.
After working at Apple Computer, Trip starts Amazing Software in 1982, right on schedule.
After I hired several employees and people had to answer the phone and say, "Amazing Software," people were thinking, I think this name's kind of silly and we should have a different name.
And the way they go about changing their name is a bit unusual.
There were about a dozen employees, and we had a rule, which was that we were going to stay up all night if necessary until we all agreed on a new name. And that you could go to bed if you wanted, but if you went to bed, you would lose your vote. So it was actually not until about 2 o'clock in the morning that everybody that was still awake agreed that the name should be Electronic Arts.
Electronic Arts is poised to turn the video game world upside down, playing by their own rules.
Probably the riskiest decision that I made in starting EA was the decision to sell directly to retailers. And at that point in time, nobody was doing that. Everybody sold to distributors who then sold to the retailers. I had studied these other media industries like records and books and noticed that the leaders all had control of their distribution.
EA laid the kind of DNA foundation pretty different than the other companies. So at EA, Trip started out keeping, I think it was 15% of the company. Trip took about 1/3 of what other founders did and basically laid the financial DNA for a big organization.
Electronic Arts also quickly realizes the importance of presentation and packaging for video games.
My thought there was that here we have packaging that's very unsophisticated for games at that time. A lot of it was just in Ziploc bags. I thought, well, number one, I don't want to spend a lot of money on the packaging, and number two, I want to have something that has more impact, that makes people think that it's a creative product. Well, hey, records sell for less than $10, so why can't we just use record packaging?
First time I heard about EA was when their first batch of games came out. They had this big press campaign about digital artists that can computer make you cry, and they had the record album looking packages.
When EA started, there was a whole different philosophy of actually having a professional organization that started out thinking about the complete process of publishing. Part of that was that attitude of how you promote the artists.
The upstart game company also makes it a point to treat developers as artists and promote them accordingly.
I was applying a lot of thinking just from looking at the music business and the book business and trying to figure out, well, what are they doing and why does it work for them and how can we apply that to what we're doing?
He brought in producers from A&M Records to teach the producers at EA how to develop artist and repertoire, because no one had ever used the title producer before. So the handful of us who were fortunate enough to be the early producers at EA were the first people ever to have that job in the industry, because Trip Hawkins was the first one to see that that was what was needed to guide products through, the same way that was in film and the way it was in music.
Terms like affiliate label, producer, director, those are terms that are still used today in the game industry.
By 1983, EA is releasing games like Hard Hat Mac and the highly regarded strategy game Mule.
Mule by Ozark Softscape and Dan Button, which got a complete aspect into players negotiating with each other through a very simple interface within the game. I talk to more game designers still today, 20 years later. If you ask them what was a game that they respect or that influenced them in their careers, a lot of people go back and talk about Mule.
Everything is going well for the young company, but the roughest times are yet to come.
It was the fall of 1983, and the video game business was crashing around our ears. Bad games were flooding the market, and sales were just dropping.
In 1983, Electronic Arts releases a game that sets the standard for sports games to come. Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one.
That was really the birth of what became EA Sports. And it was the first time in the industry that celebrities had been used in a game.
Graphically, it was very simplistic compared to what we were used to in the coin-op world. They were actually taking real stats and applying them to a game, trying to bring it to life, made it more real. It was really an interesting idea.
That game ended up being a big success for us. It was really our first genuine hit product.
Not long after the success of Dr. J and Larry Bird, the video game market takes a turn for the worse.
The whole decade of the 1980s, EA's ultimate success and even existence was in doubt.
It was the fall of 1983, and the video game business was crashing around our ears. The cartridge business had been suffocated in a tremendous oversupply of product from new people. Bad games were flooding the market, and sales were just dropping. And PCs were just starting to catch fire in the homes and take off.
EA survives by capitalizing on the rise of computers with popular PC titles like Archon in 1984 and The Bard's Tale in 1985. Building on the success of Dr. J and Larry Bird go one-on-one, Trip pursues another sports legend, John Madden.
Being a serious football fan, I wanted to make a real football game, a much more sophisticated game. That's why I wanted to recruit a coach like John Madden to help make sure we got all of the details of authenticity right.
So he got the Madden, and Madden, of course, thought he was a total dweeb. But Trip rode across country on the train with Madden, talking football all the time. So after, an hour on the train with Trip, he realized Trip was also a football fanatic. And Trip came back with, a 3-ring binder full of notes. So we decided to work with him. Then after the deal's done, Trip goes in and says, okay, coach, here's your game. Madden said, where's all the guys? It's 7-on-7. Trip goes, yeah, this is, on these computers, this is all we do now. And Madden said, no, you can't ship a game with my name on it, that's not real football.
We had such an ambitious undertaking. It took 4 years to make the game.
It was almost killed a number of times.
And it became known in the company as Tripp's Folly. Everyone in the company thought we should just give up and forget the whole thing. And I was just very determined to make it work.
But it was really his baby.
When we go back to the original PC versions, the men's series was more of a novelty. When it first came out, it was not a huge success. Back then, sports and video game players were not the same crowd.
Although Electronic Arts survives the 80s by developing for the PC, the video game market is rapidly becoming more and more console-heavy.
Up until that time, EA was strictly a computer company. We did no console work. A bunch of us, including Larry Probst, who was a sales guy at the time, he and I and a few others were, pretty vociferous about wanting to take EA from this little, what we called a boutique software, company into a bigger mass market console company. Tripp goes, okay, figure out what you want to do and let's do it. I think you guys are, finally right. We've got this experience in sports, we better stick with it and really go